On today's episode of Locked On Suns, what did the postseason tell us about where the Suns stack up in the NBA, and how could that change when the offseason comes around? We'll talk about it all in today's episode. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we're back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 6 seasons, a writer at Suns.com, and the host of the Just Basketball Show, wherever you get your podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Suns your first listen here on this Friday to close out your week. Next week, the fireworks start in the NBA, so hit follow or subscribe. We're free and available on all podcast platforms, so wherever you're finding us, all you got to do is hit follow or subscribe to get this show in your feed every day. Get locked onto your favorite team and become an everydayer. That's right. We are, at least for the foreseeable future, going to be checking in with you each and every day about the Phoenix Suns. Aaron Edwards is here, as he is every week, to close us out. We're going to talk about where the Suns stack up and how that could change in the next couple of weeks with the offseason. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Okay, Aaron, so let me ask you this question to start things off. Well, first of all, I don't know how existential you get. I was telling you right before we hit record that I'm a little tired of how this weird bridge between the finals and the offseason, people just get a little carried away. But is it just me, or maybe I count basketball things, count the calendar by basketball things too much? But when it got time to record with you again this week, it's getting to that time of year where I was like, has it been a week already?
Yeah.
And I was just kind of like, I feel like we just talked. I feel like there's not a lot that has changed, but somehow 7 days have passed.
Yeah, I mean, the last one, we had to do 2 in a day. So I think that's
true.
Why I remember. It's because we recorded and Chris Paul leaked to Chris that he wanted to pretty much get released or whatever. So, yeah, I think that's probably what made it more memorable for me, was that we kind of had to call an audible out of nowhere.
Somehow, I guess it feels like it's been more than a week since that. So I guess maybe I'm contradicting myself. But here we are. The rumors are flying, as I predicted doing the show yesterday evening. One new insider drops one new report about some particular player every single day this time of year. Today, it was sort of Zach LaVine getting his moment in the sun. We don't really have anything from a Phoenix standpoint to discuss with him. So instead, the question I was going to start with, Aaron, is, I don't think I've talked about this with anybody that's come on the show, but I've talked about it myself. How homerish is it to try to make the case that the Suns taking 2 games from Denver, being the only team to take them to 6 in this entire postseason, is that something that you feel good about if you're a Suns fan, that you just sort of chalk up to randomness, or that doesn't matter at all? Like, where do you kind of land on that spectrum if I'm James Jones being like, did that really mean something, or do we have to really improve to really get where we want to go?
I tweeted specifically after Denver won the championship was, I hate that the Suns took 2 off Denver because James Jones is going to think we're close. I said exactly that because Book had to shoot 80% for us to take those 2 games. Yeah. And they were still close games. Like, they weren't blowouts. Like, when they beat us, it was a blowout. When we beat them, we had to squeak by. So, yeah.
Let me take issue with that briefly, because I hear you, and you sound like a Nuggets fan right now is what I'm really going to say. But because, look, game 2,
we could have had
Paul doesn't get hurt, I think they could have won that game. That was a close game. And the Suns were literally in the middle of a run when Chris Paul got hurt. And so it feels like it was a lot of just the Denver thing, especially that they do at home, where they're just going to step on the gas. And it's like, if you don't have anything left or your stuff doesn't keep working, they're just going to have that against you. Like, Lakers fans, I'm sure, are going through kind of the same thing, where it's like, they swept us, but like all the games were close, but obviously we weren't good enough. Like, I think that the Nuggets particularly kind of do that to you, but I don't know. I personally don't think it's fair to sit there and say that, like, all the losses were just so ugly that you can't like feel good about it. But I hear you still.
Yeah, I mean, like when Monty like kind of went against his grain and put scores on the floor, it looked better and it looked like more productive. So if we can find something like that, and I think like with Book's gonna regress from 80%, like obviously, and he did in that last game. Thing is, KD shot like 20% from 3 in that series. Yeah. So I think if KD plays up to his standards, and even with Book's regression, I think that's just a good place to start. And not having to play campaign and our center being out. Like, I get what happened, but at the same time, like, Book had to shoot 80% for us to take those games off, or for us to take those games. And Jokic still put up 50. So I don't know, like,
in a loss.
Yeah. So I don't know, like,
that game.
where that, like, and we still were a team that didn't shoot enough threes. We definitely didn't make enough threes. So I think just the change with that, like, I don't know what Vogel's going to do specifically. But I think we just have to be a team that shoots more threes and defends better. And if we can find that, and our second best or best players plays maybe a lot better than he did in the last series, then we're probably a little bit closer.
So on the Suns side, the thing that really jumps out to me from that series, looking back on it, is the fact that all the stuff you said is obviously true. Book shot 57% overall, and that includes that last game when he was obviously really cold, 55% from deep. Both those guys were at 30 points per game. Both those guys were at 5+ assists per game. Like, it was too heavy of a burden, and that has to change. But honestly, maybe even more than that for me, it's that they both played 41 minutes per game, you know? And like, even Jokic, who was playing a lot more than, like, I think, I don't know the numbers. I'm not going to bother looking at it too deep, but it felt like Jokic was having to play more minutes in some of those games than even he wanted to. And he still only got to 38.5 minutes. So that's like 3 below what the Suns guys were at. But defense, I think, is also the key there. Cause it's like, I looked this up doing a show after game 5, and the Kings had the best offense in probably league history, because that number gets set every year, but they were the best offense in the NBA this season. I think their offensive rating was like 119. In the regular season. The Denver Nuggets in the playoffs had a 120 offensive rating. And that's not supposed to happen. Like, most of the time you see some of that stuff go down because the games just get a little weirder. And that includes this Heat series where they were not like able to score like they had been. And they still were at 120 over the course of the whole postseason. Against the Suns, they were 122. So think about it that way. The Suns allowed the Nuggets to have an offensive rating 3 points per 100 possessions better than the best offense in the regular season, which was Sacramento, in their second round series. Like, you just can't, that's not going to be tenable. You have to maybe not get them to how Miami made them look, but even just where the Lakers made them look, I think the Suns would have had a better chance. They were just allowing those guys to score, 110, 115, 120 every night, and that's not going to work out. But let me put it to you this way. Let's go through, and I'll just kind of ask you right now, and then as we go through the show, we'll talk about how it could change. But right now, coming off of this postseason, what we just saw happen, and obviously some of the questions going forward will factor in here, but the Nuggets are above the Suns, right?
Yeah.
Are the Lakers?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, I just can't see it. It's so many question marks when it comes to both of us, though. Like, they might have our point guard, we might have theirs. I don't know, like, what this is gonna look like at the end.
Yeah. Memphis, I don't think anyone would be like, yeah, okay. The Warriors.
With Steph, you just kind of like, and the owner that's willing to spend, you kind of just don't really know. They don't want to waste Steph, because the second he's kind of done with it, then you're kind of done. So I could see them like still trying to. They were still trying to toe that line between rebuilding and being a dynasty still. And like I think Bomani says on the podcast all the time, you can't do both. You got to choose and then just live with their chances. And that's why the Kuminga thing didn't work. So I just think like trying to rebuild and be a dynasty at the same time just doesn't work. So they're going to have to make a decision. And depending on what decision they make, I can still see them being a problem.
They'll at least be right there. I would say the same thing about the Clippers. I think you kind of made that point about the Lakers. But is there anybody that you would say, if Denver's the clear cut, like they're the favorite to come out of the West going into next season because they just won it, Is there anyone that you would say is a clear number 2 that you would put ahead of the Suns?
No, I don't think there's even. I think the drop off from the Nuggets to even us is kind of a little bit more than people want to say, and the drop off from us to 3 is a lot. I think. I think that there's so many question marks with a lot of these teams. I think the West it was really strong this year, but there's so many teams that are going to have to make decisions in the West. Like the Pelicans' best player is kind of maybe not going to be on the team. Trade bait for the 3rd pick. Like it's so many. Minnesota, like one of those dudes might not be there toward the end of the offseason. Like we don't know. Like I really, there's so many question marks in the West, and I think the East is kind of like has more solidified themselves, and they kind of know what it's going to be.
So I think I would probably say I maybe think of the Suns as in more of a cluster for that number 2, maybe a touch ahead of everybody else. I think that might be the only place that you and I differ, but you're exactly right. And like I feel like I'm always the guy trying to kind of be the, look at the bright side type of thing. But I do feel like, especially having Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, it's just really hard to pick anybody and just say for definitively that they're going to be better than the Suns. Like that just feels very difficult for me to say, at least in a postseason environment, if they're both healthy. But let's talk about what some of those questions might be like, what these other teams are going to be doing. I think there's a lot more flexibility on some of these other teams, which could put them ahead. We'll get into all those questions next. First, today's show brought to you by Bird Dogs. You've probably seen their ads. If you're on their mailing list, you get some of their funny emails from time to time. They like to keep it loose. They like to have fun. But really the baseline, the most important thing you need to know is that they made the most comfortable shorts that I've ever tried on, and they make you look good too. Bird Dog stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg and give you a truly sculpted look. They fit way better than regular shorts that are made of stiff, restricting cotton. So if you are maybe a bigger guy, maybe you are somebody who does a lot of stuff outdoors, or you're just kind of on the go during the day, even if you think you're the most athletic person on earth, you still might want to have something that can flex and move with you. They're perfect for everybody is the point. Bird Dogs uses anti-stink sweat-wicking fabric that keeps you cool, which is perfect for the Arizona sun. So go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA to get a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You won't want to take these Bird Dogs off. That's our promise. Okay, Aaron. So we talked about it a little bit at the very beginning. Zach LaVine, Bradley Beal, James Harden, Kyrie Irving. We've already started to hear a lot of these names get thrown around, including some guys on the Suns, from DeAndre Ayton to Chris Paul and everything else. What's the biggest realistic domino? And obviously it's the NBA. We know that this stuff comes out of nowhere. We're 2 weeks out from the anniversary of Chris Haynes tweeting out that Kevin Durant wanted to be a Sun, when literally none of us were really expecting that to be a real possibility. But with what we know now, what's the biggest domino you could imagine that would make you feel differently than that ranking we kind of just did in that last segment? Is there a move on the horizon where you're like, if that happens, the West will change and maybe the Suns do get knocked down a peg?
I think with the Kyrie thing, I think if Kyrie goes to the Lakers, or if he just goes to pretty much any of those like middling Western Conference teams, he changes your franchise regardless. Or if Dallas makes a move with just a decent center, like a center that is a center at least, I think that would kind of change things a little bit. Like I think that Dallas, with just having one of the best players in the league and still trying to kind of keeping themselves in it, I think that like that would be a big jump, just getting anything like anything productive at center, or just a big from them. But yeah, like most of those guys, they're not really attached to the Western Conference, or except Harden, but his stuff is like pretty set on either he wants to win a championship in Philly or he wants to go back home and kick it. Like it's really what it comes down to.
I don't think the Houston Rockets are going to be on our list, even if that move did come to be. So the Lakers thing, it sounds like the insidery types don't really actually feel like the Kyrie to the Lakers.
I don't think it does either. I think even with the Blazers, like if they do manage to get rid of that 3 and get like Brandon Ingram or a Zion or something, like that would be a much better team and probably pretty fun too. But I still don't think that kind of compares. I really do think it's a really good team though.
So let's focus on the Mavs then. I was telling you before we hit record to the person in my mentions who thinks DeAndre Ayton's going to go to Atlanta for DeJounte Murray and John Collins, which, salute to that guy. Keep your dreams alive. Don't let anyone tell you differently. That's not happening, though. The other one that I see a lot, and that's, I think, just a trolling Mavs fan who hasn't gotten over what happened 14 months ago now, but he'll come on and he'll just say Luka Doncic is Devin Booker's father. There's a lot of typos in there. I'm not sure if it might be a Slovenian or Serbian man who does this because it seems like there's some English going on. But point is, we know how fraught that conversation is. So I'm not here to pump up the Mavs and make Suns fans deal with us talking about how good this team may be. But my real question to you is, what do you think of Luka as a champion number one play? Like, do you think, because I think there's a lot of the NBA media fawns over him, right? And this past year, I really did start to flip. I don't think the way he played this season, I don't think his lack of commitment to defense, his lack of commitment to being a team player, like, I don't think people really get. There's James Harden and Russell Westbrook during those MVP years in the mid 2000s in terms of usage and assist rate. And then there's Luka Doncic. Like, it's unprecedented, the amount that he dominates the ball. I just don't think that's sustainable. So that's the thing that gets in the way of me feeling like, because I do think there's a possibility if they bring back Kyrie and they make another trade, that team could be pretty good. That team could have 3-star players on it, whether it's Pascal Siakam or it's DeAndre Ayton or, maybe he's not a star, but somebody like that, right? And that would be a pretty good top 3. But I do think that there is a lot holding me back, and I might put Booker and Durant both above him in terms of guys that I trust to win postseason series, as crazy as that might sound, considering this guy's putting up historic numbers.
Yeah, with Luka, it's kind of, he's only had coaches ask him to do that. Like, Jason Kidd doesn't exactly have full control. I'm not sure if Luka can play the team ball like that. Book finally had to switch to once Monty got here and Chris Paul got here. He hasn't been asked to do it because Jason Kidd's his coach, I think. And so if he finally do a good coach, then I don't know. I think Rick Carlisle was kind of already on his way out in his head. So I think if he has a coach that really wants to play team ball and kind of like is willing to kind of go at him a little bit, then I could see him kind of getting it together and deciding to play that way. But Jason Kidd isn't exactly like a coach. He's kind of like a substitute teacher that has one of the best players in the league.
Yeah. I feel that. It's what's funny though is just hearing you say Kidd, and I was going to interrupt, but I wanted to let you finish because I think what you said is probably closer to the truth. It could even be star players. I don't know if Kyrie's necessarily the guy to get the most out of his teammates from like a play style perspective or even an interpersonal perspective. He seems to kind of want to be the co-pilot in a lot of ways. It's not like he's going to come in and necessarily change what's going on. So I don't know if it's him, but I could imagine Luka finds the right teammate maybe eventually and switches things up. But it's funny to hear you say Jason Kidd, because it's like, that's like one of the most unselfish superstar players we've ever had. And it's kind of crazy to think that, he wouldn't be the guy to bring that out, but it just hasn't really gone that way. I think Kidd is just like a unique personality more than anything, regardless of what he wants to do basketball wise.
Yeah, I think he kind of just got stuck. He just did the if it ain't broke kind of thing. Even though he lost his job in Milwaukee by doing it, he did change Giannis's career. He was like, "You're the point guard. You run the show. Learn how to do this." And once he put the ball in Giannis's hand first, and not like have Brandon Jennings bouncing the air out of the ball and then just Giannis sitting in the corner. So I think like once that worked, just in his head, he was like, "My best player has the ball at all times, and we'll figure it out from there." And that's kind of just not going to work this time, probably.
If I were to tell you that the Grizzlies deal with the Ja thing, I think I'll just start by saying I feel like Memphis and the energy around their future has gotten really negative for understandable reasons with Ja, but it's all kind of happened while they're not playing basketball. And I just think people have kind of forgotten that that's still a pretty damn good team that has been really good in the regular season for multiple years and was pretty close to making it a competitive series, if not beating the Warriors like 1 year ago. And I know that I'm not trying to discount everything that's happened, but I think we underestimate how quickly it could just flip back in the other direction, and we just laugh about how crazy things were with Ja. I don't know enough to say anything, but I'm just saying that's a possibility. If they were to deal with the suspension that's coming his way, which they've been pretty good without him in the regular season in the past, and we know they were getting to be pretty aggressive. It sounded like they made bids for OG and for Mikal at the deadline. If they were to get a guy like that, what'd you say?
I said a pretty big bid from Mikal.
Exactly. From what it sounded like, they were all in, and it just didn't really work out because Toronto and Brooklyn didn't want to play ball. So if they were to, let's say they get Anunoby, I'm not really sure Mikal's available. Let's say it's Anunoby, and he's a really, really good shooter, a really good wing defender. Maybe he gets a little more creative with the ball in his hands, and it works out perfectly, and they're even better. I could see them feeling like a team come this time next year if Ja and Triple J, and then they have Bane and Anunoby as kind of secondary guys. If that feels like a team that could be maybe what the Nuggets were this year. Nobody's as good as Jokic, but that type of top to bottom team that would just be really hard to beat. That's one that I could see happening that maybe isn't going to get a superstar this offseason, but if they get another really good role player that I think we could feel differently about like this time or, heading into the playoffs next year.
Yeah, I still think that, they're two like gritty defensive bigs that kind of did like the grunt work, got hurt. Like I think they were Steven Adams away from making a couple series longer. Like I think that he would annoy and just kind of bang down there to the point that you can kind of do a little bit different stuff. So I think just not having those bigs available was kind of the bigger thing with them. Like they just didn't have the bodies.
It'll be interesting. Let's get a little bit reckless here in the next segment and just guess where everybody's going. And I have a feeling a lot of it's going to be in the East, which is part of what I'm sort of getting at while we're talking here. But we'll just go through some of the big names and guess, predict where they're going to go, and then circle back. First, today's show brought to you by the Gametime app. I am looking at their homepage now. They have CONCACAF Gold Cup tickets. They have College World Series tickets. They even have professional bull riding available. Buying your tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. That's the core belief at the center of Gametime. They are the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you with killer deals on last-minute tickets and their signature best price guarantee. They allow you at Gametime to stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun that you'll have. Get images of your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds and get those tickets sent directly to your phone so you never have to dig through your email while you're standing in line and get embarrassed and all that stuff. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Snag the tickets without the stress using Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, let's go through, Aaron, and just kind of predict. This one's interesting. We don't really know who might be interested here, but Zach LaVine, do you feel like he's a difference maker? Where do you like him the most? Like, what team would you feel like would be the best spot for him, even if we don't necessarily know where he's going to go yet?
That's a tough one because when he's good, he's really good, but he's just abysmal on defense. So who wants that? I think Miami already has Hero, so that would make sense.
And they want Beal, right? I mean, that seems like almost a lock at this point.
Yeah, I think I kind of just think he stays, or I don't know. Like, I just don't see who is Zach LaVine away. Like, that was probably the tougher one. I'm kind of mad you started with that one because that was the one I kind of just didn't.
It's the weirdest one. That's kind of why I wanted to do it. But so my instinct with a guy like that, and even Beal, and I think that's why Miami makes so much sense because they're like this, is I always try to see, is there a place that has all the defensive stuff already figured out that can take a guy like that? So Toronto, although I want Toronto to reset, I just think it'd be more interesting to kind of toss their players on a different team because I'm kind of tired of them just being 500 every year. And then it's always a maybe they'll trade this guy and it never happens. So I just kind of wanted to, but that could be one. Miami, obviously. What about the Clippers? Because I think that's a West team we didn't really talk about. They have all the salaries they could possibly want. I think a player like that where they don't have to give up a bunch of picks is good because obviously we know they don't really have many of those after the Paul George trade and some of their other deals along the way. And they could just slot him into basically what like Norm Powell and Eric Gordon have been doing for them, but an even better offensive guy. Maybe that helps in the regular season when they don't have Kawhi and Paul George all the time. And then when they do have those guys, he's just kind of more of a shooter and secondary ball handler type of player. I don't love the fit, but that one seems interesting to me.
Yeah, that seems like the biggest when they all play together kind of teams. Like when they're all healthy, then this team looks really good. But that's very big when they're all healthy kind of question mark squad.
Yeah, I didn't think about it that way. Another injury question mark guy on a team that already has too many of those. Yeah, I'll be interested to see. The Sixers, if they don't get Harden, are kind of going to be linked to a lot of these teams, I would guess. The Celtics, like, could that be, they consolidate the Brogdon, White, Smart role and give up maybe one of those guys or two of those guys? What'd you say?
I have another person for the Celtics.
Okay, go for it.
Bradley Beal. I think, I think if they really are out on the Jaylen Brown thing, which if somebody can't use their hand after year 5 or whatever this is, then kind of just chalk it up to that's what they are and see what you can get for it. Like, that's kind of how it's not to that extent because he's an all-star, but that's kind of how we are with Ayton right now. It's like he hasn't figured out how to bang and get fouled and box out now. Like, maybe Vogel can figure it out, but like we're at the point to where when some dude show you who they are, they're just that. And Jaylen Brown, like, he's gotten like better. Like, he's like, you can tell some of the stuff he's worked on, but Miami like severely took advantage of his flaws during that series. And I think at that point, you kind of just got to chalk it up to what it is.
Yeah, that would be a weird trade because I think Brown has more like value, on the trade market. But at the same time, what the Celtics might want would look a little more like Beal. So it'd be a weird one of like who's giving up more than just that player. I actually think it would be Washington. So then are you talking about, Danny Avdia, or I don't know what else you would really want there. So that would be an interesting one. It feels like the Miami stuff is out there, but that also starts to turn into, okay, Miami's the leader. That means somebody else needs to outbid the Heat. That doesn't mean that he's going to the Heat for sure. That just means they're the current favorite, and we know how that can change.
And it got mentioned with Milwaukee too. And I think if they are really out on Middleton and they kind of just want to go a different route and go Middleton, Holiday, if they want to do something crazy like that and some picks and then just go from there, you have a scorer that can have the ball in his hand when Giannis doesn't want to get fouled and like you can deal with all that stuff. I think that's fine too, even though like you go from one of like the best defensive teams in the league to pretty much like everybody else. You're pretty much kind of the Sixers at that point. So I don't know, like, what do you want to do with that route?
Yeah, I'll say Beal to Miami, and just we'll see what happens there. James Harden, what do you think? Do you think it's Houston or Philly or something else?
When you have to like decide if it's basketball or not basketball, that's where you're just stuck. Like, it's either he just wants to have fun the rest of his career because he can't really get by a bunch of people anymore and play with a young team and he doesn't have to do all the work, or go to the Sixers and be literally like the second best player on a team to Joel Embiid and try to win a championship on an East that's going to be better next year, I think, or it's going to be at least a little weird. So yeah, I don't know what his goal is. With Harden, it's different because it's not like, oh, I can win a championship over here. Like, I like the guys over there. We can make a run. Or I can win a championship where I'm at. We're just a couple pieces away. I still think we're close. It's, do I want to live in Houston again? Do I want to go try to play for a championship and do a deep playoff run? And you don't know. You never know.
Yeah. I'll say he goes back to Philly. I think that the Houston thing, you read some stuff where it's like there's more of a personal maybe side to it that's not public. I don't know if that's family health stuff or whatever the case is. Guys do have those situations and it doesn't always get talked about as much as maybe it could. but then you want to keep it private. It is a weird dynamic. I think that might be some of what's going on there, but I would just say at the end of the day, whether it was that or it was just a pure leverage thing, I have a hard time imagining that somebody would just be so blatant about going. He's not like he's 40, going back to something where it's just like, yeah, I'm not going to win. That just feels pretty crazy to me, especially him being so aware of what people think of him. It would just be kind of the ultimate like validation for the haters, so to speak, for him. And it just feels, I don't know. I'll believe it when I see it, I guess. Kyrie Irving, I'm going to go Mavs. I just think it's kind of a similar thing where it's like he's going to poke around this and poke around that and get rumored here. And his, team might leak, oh, we might go to Houston with their cap space just to gin up the price and make Mark Cuban pay him the max that he can pay him. But even if he doesn't want to be in Dallas, I think Kyrie knows more than anybody. Take the money, figure it out the next time that you have a little bit of leverage. And then, if you want to change your situation, the NBA has shown us that will be available to you if you want it.
Yeah, I think the market is just going to dictate he's going to be there at least till All-Star break. I think it was the same with the KD thing. Even though it's still going to be a new contract over there, I think you're going to ride it out and then probably make your request later on. I don't think a saga is ever over with Kyrie. So I think even if he does sign
his whole career is a saga. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think he's going to sign back, but I think it's not going to be over because nothing's ever over.
Yeah, I mean, look at it this way. Austin Reeves and Rui Hachimura are free agents right now, but what happens at the deadline or next summer when they're under contract and tradable? Just put it that way, right? Like those things will be different. Right now, the Lakers just don't have anything to trade. D'Angelo Russell, maybe, but that's not going to get it done. What do you do? I think that's kind of the obvious thing to look at. But let me give you 3 guys that are potential trade pieces that are maybe a little less likely to change teams, but just give me the team name and then we'll wrap up from there. But I just want to hit these guys. So Damian Lillard, tell me what team he's on the opening night of next season.
Portland.
Okay, agreed. Karl Anthony Towns.
I don't know. I think that's one of those ones where you're going to be watching the NBA draft and be like, what just happened? Yeah. Like with them, they could go either way. And I can definitely see something happening. Like I kind of would say Blazers. I don't know. If they want to go that route, sure.
Who knows? I would say the Knicks, but I think that Julius Randle contract is awful, and I don't really know what they're going to do about that.
We used to want that contract. I've seen the Suns fans. Y'all wanted it. I remember.
I mean, yeah, it's the playoff runs in 21 and 23 that just make it hard. It's like at least before the playoff stuff, it's like he could work in this way or that way. And then it's like when he's hurt and he's not playing, basketball the right way and everything, you're just kind of like, all right, well, that's faded a little bit. We know it. We know now. All right, last one word answer, team that Trae Young will be on the beginning of next season.
Atlanta.
I would agree with you there.
Actually, I'm on a streak of saying this in every pod the last 3, I think. So I want Markelle Fultz to be a Sun. I'm never going to stop that agenda. I'm going to keep talking about it. Let's get Markelle Fultz here.
Landry Shamet and 4 second-round picks. Let's call it into the league office. It's happening. All right, that'll wrap us up. We'll see what happens. Probably tons more rumors by the next time we record on Sunday. If anything really big happens, like an Ayton or Chris Paul trade, for instance, I will, of course, log back in, and you will have a bonus show in your feed as soon as I possibly can get it to you. But in the meantime, listen to Locked On NBA. They'll have you covered for everything going on around the whole league. Get your rumors and reports and all that stuff broken down each and every day on that show. They're available on all podcast platforms as well. And I will catch you guys on Monday.